Day 722 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses as Russia has reached the 400,000 milestone for military personnel losses. Truly a staggering number and a conservative figure, no less, which is something I've spoken about at length time and time again. Then, as for hardware losses, it was an equally feeling attritional day for the Russian forces, with 23 tanks, 39 APVs, and 21 artillery. Then we'll head across to the map now and start out in Russia as Russia has been hitting itself again, this time in Belgorod city, where a failed missile launch from a Russian military base north of the city fired towards the Kharkiv direction in Ukraine. But due to relatively high failure rates for Russian rockets and missiles, in contrast to other militaries, this one fell and impacted part of a Russian shopping mall. And Belgorod is quite susceptible to these types of issues, so why might this be? Well, apart from the high failure rates I've just mentioned, the Russian military has been firing from bases just north of the city since near the beginning of the war, with a real in-the-line-of-fire scenario when it comes to the positioning of a Russian military base placement. Then on the flip side, after incredible Ukrainian patience, where you might remember the time when Ukraine wouldn't even dare to strike at Russian motherland positions, which is all but a distant memory now. The times have changed, not to mention Ukraine weapons arsenals, and they will no longer stand a bully, meaning they now routinely send one-way UAV drones to exhaust Russian air defenses and military sites in Belgorod. It's a forever changed dynamic now that Russia clearly never expected. But it's not all rocket and missile fire warmth in Russia right now, because take for example, Russia's central Novosibirsk region, with Russia still feeling the winter fallout of years and years of corrupt state underfunding, causing their dilapidated infrastructure to inevitably lead to under-maintained and burst heating mains in the streets. That at first glance may appear something like a luxurious Icelandic hot spa. But the reality instead is that this is no holiday for the nearby residents, dealing with the fallout from their particularly corrupt leaders, for which the invasion into Ukraine has only exacerbated, or shed more light on and exposed these societal issues to the local citizenry. Then we'll head across into the Ukrainian map today as intel resources suggest that major concentrations of Russian forces exist in the Kupiansk and Crimea directions of the northern Donbass. As such, it's likely that Russian forces will shortly increase their offensive tempo in these areas of operations. But it wouldn't be the first time that these types of concentrations exist, and just like in previous Russian offensive attempts with concerted push efforts, they'd still have to deal with the veritable minefields on the ground, some of them Russia's own, but they'd also have to deal with the ready and raring AFU drones in the skies as well. In fact, a good example of this is how more than 10 armoured vehicles, including 7 tanks and 1 TOS-1A flamethrower, were simply devoured by the combined efforts of Ukrainian FPV units and artillery in the Crimea direction just today. And in that instance, with most of the assault forces still deep behind their own lines when they had met their fate. Then we move to Avdiivka, with almost everything pointing towards a strategic withdrawal by Ukraine, which is certainly unfortunate on the one hand, but on the other hand, Ukraine both wants and needs to retain its military personnel, and they will never take a meat grinder approach like that of their enemy. Now, the Ukrainian 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, tasked with stabilizing the situation, faces a daunting challenge with a force ratio of 1-7 against Russia, highlighting the critical condition in Avdiivka right now. Ukrainian General Tarnavsky acknowledged the dire circumstances and the partial withdrawal of Ukrainian forces, emphasizing the prioritization of soldiers' lives while continuing to fortify and defend against Russian advances. Now, the Russian military efforts right here to capture Avdiivka have been described as incremental, yet their potential success could provide immediate political gains rather than operational significance. As such, the situation has led to Avdiivka being effectively split, threatening Ukrainian lines of communication and supply. And despite significant Russian casualties, Russia continues to replenish its forces, maintaining pressure on Ukrainian defenses. Also, the White House has labeled the situation in Avdiivka as critical, with spokesperson John Kirby attributing the perilous positions to a lack of US congressional support, hindering the supply of essential ammunition and weapons to Ukraine. And this situation underscores the intense and evolving battle for Avdiivka, where Ukrainian forces, supported by elite units and facing a numerical disadvantage, struggle to hold their ground against a relentless Russian offensive. And it's a game of shells, artillery shells that is. But hey, even the realities for the Russian forces are not so great themselves, with one Russian soldier stating that out of a brigade of 4,000 people, only 30% remain. And I won't show the video for this next part, but basically the Russian soldier goes on to state their eliminated soldiers are everywhere on the Avdiivka front. That is to say, eliminated Russian soldiers. And he also went on to say, quote, "There's war, but it was a meat grinder here." So for every meter of land of Ukraine that they take, they pay an unreasonable price. And it's waiting for them everywhere in Ukraine. But let's put the likely captured outcome into perspective, shall we? Because I'm a numbers guy, and the numbers just don't add up. For instance, Russia is throwing and wasting an army the size of a medium to large European country's army to achieve a 100 square kilometer capture of land, which, in the context of Ukraine's size of about 600,000 square kilometers, makes this probable upcoming capture equal to only 0.01% of Ukrainian land, which makes it a mind-boggling approach for any army to take. And these loss figures on the screen here are both conservative and outdated figures even, by a space of a month, not to mention. And with Avdiivka still to this moment, still holding, this place really is Bakhmut 2.0 on every single metric. Then moving across somewhere in the east, footage from a Ukrainian Baba Yaga multi-munition carrier unit drone shown in service with the 36th Marine Brigade, conducting a nighttime attack mission on the southern front, in fact, this one. Then to Zaporizhia, as intelligence reports indicate that Russian forces are concentrating on multiple axes of attack in preparation of offensive operations on the Orikhiv front. And so far, a Russian assault was met west of Verbova and was driven back, and there was a second assault southwest of Robotyne, also repelled. And from a more generalized operational perspective for Russia, this is quite the distance to cover for Russia in terms of logistical support, not to mention air support that was forced to be pushed right back some months ago due to all of those longer-ranged Ukrainian strike platforms coming to the fore. Then briefly to the Krinky bridgehead in the west, as continued repelling of the same type of Russian attacks on this front with the help of FPV drones is ongoing and successful for the Ukrainian forces. And it's still unbelievable that 9+ Russian brigades can't close a bridgehead held by a Ukrainian battalion. Evidently, Ukrainian Marine battalions are made of ductile steel. Then headed across to some news for today. So the Spanish Defense Minister has announced the rapid transfer of a batch of 20 of the M113 tracked armoured personnel carriers to Ukraine, but also impressively an aspired SAM battery for Ukraine's armed forces too. Then, in some relatable news, in a significant show of support for Ukraine, so Britain and Latvia have taken the lead in forming an international coalition to enhance Ukraine's drone capabilities, committing to supply hundreds of thousands of drones as part of a $250 million initiative announced last year. And this coalition aims to provide Ukraine with the essential tools to defend itself and counteract Russia's aggressive actions. Simultaneously, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg highlighted the alliance's broader commitment, revealing plans by a group of allies to deliver a staggering 1 million drones to Ukraine. And this initiative is part of a comprehensive aid package that also includes F-16 equipment, spare parts, and air defense systems, underscoring NATO's vital role in supporting Ukraine's military efforts. Then moving across to some Russian economy-related news. So yesterday, 4 Russian airlines faced significant flight disruptions due to various technical issues. For instance, a Russia Airlines Sukhoi Superjet 100 en route from Moscow to St. Petersburg was forced to make an emergency landing following engine failure shortly after takeoff. Then, in other cases, 2 more Russian Airlines flights had to return due to technical issues. Both were Boeing 737s. And lastly, a Boeing 737-800 series heading to Stavropol from Moscow struck its tail on the runway somehow, ultimately resulting in the plane being grounded from subsequent flights. So with these examples we see here, the dwindling of Russia's remaining Western fleet of aircraft, being leased aircraft and not returned and therefore stolen, with no access to genuine parts, causing all sorts of mishaps in the process here. And it's also causing an over-reliance and wearing of airframes on Russia's terrible Sukhoi passenger aircraft, which were already known for their poor safety record before sanctions and before Ukraine was ever invaded by Russia. So inevitably, this can only go one way for Russia, as from a purely mathematical standpoint, a dwindling passenger aircraft fleet will simply force average flight route prices to go up, leading to an unbalanced lack of physical interconnectedness for the largest country on the planet. Then, in some other news, unexpectedly, Viktor Sokolov has been removed from the post of commander of the Black Sea Fleet. That's right, a dead man fired from his post. Now, Sokolov, of course, hadn't been seen since a successful Ukrainian strike on the Black Sea Fleet headquarters in occupied Crimea back around September time last year, and he was since presumed dead after that incident. But Russia clearly used the most recent event of the sinking of the Russian Kunikov ship in the Black Sea from just a couple of days ago to refill this guy's position, as it were. So, blaming the dead guy, which makes him the scapiest of scapegoats you've ever seen, and another classic face-saving tactic for Russia in the process. Oh, and now that I think about it, for Russia, we had Sokolov, a ghost commanding the Black Sea Fleet for half a year. Then we also have Gerasimov, chief of the General Staff of Russia, another ghost, missing for some weeks now. We also have seedy Uncle Prigozhin, a confirmed ghost, still leading the remnants of the Wagner forces in spirit only. You know, Russia should see fit to use this excuse of missing military leadership to blame for their entirely botched invasion of Ukraine. After all, they love their excuses, as per this map illustration. Then headed across to a couple of quick funnies to round it all off today, guys. So the first one is a Russian soldier dancing with an AFU drone. It's like a wild digital predator after a human. Now, although the Russian soldier did survive the impact at the end, he didn't seem really in good shape. Do note, the end of this content video would be very probably will still be considered to be too spicy for this platform. So if you're super interested to see it and support my channel as well at the same time, you can check it out on my Patreon link below in the video description. Then moving across to a final funny to round it all off today, guys. So as the president of Russia, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, during his campaign season for re-election, found a new point of pride for Russia: the ability of a Russian man to drink alcohol with shaking hands. And I'm sure many of us could achieve this, but I don't think we'd make it a point of pride. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment. I really do appreciate it all, not to mention the support, the Patreon page there as well. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.